This episode is brought to you by HOCl. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the bottom feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this Best of Bob Lowry, I'm going to talk to Bob Lowry about low pH and the dangers of having really low pH in your pool. And of course, Bob Lowry was the premier chemical expert in the pool industry, and he has a wealth of knowledge to share with listeners. Even after, of course, his passing a few years ago, these recordings, I think, are a great asset to the pool industry. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support. From me, I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. Let's talk about something that we don't hear much about, but recently I had a member of my group. He had a vinyl pool that had a pH of 6, which probably would be lower than that in a lot of cases, depending on the test kit he was using. And low pH typically is not a problem you hear about. High pH is something that we hear about a lot more, but low pH can be a big problem also. What happens if the pH gets too low in a pool for a long period of time?
Well, when the pH is low, the water gets to be what we say is corrosive or aggressive. And it can, in a plaster pool, it can dissolve or start to etch the plaster. And so you get the plaster, instead of being real nice and smooth, becomes kind of rough. So we get etched plaster, we get corrosion of equipment. So the metallic parts that are in any of the components in the system, whether it's the heater header or the impeller on the pump or whatever is in metal in the pool can start to dissolve also. And then the dissolved metal gets into the water and it is invisible until it gets to a certain level. And that certain level is what we call the saturation point. When it reaches the saturation point for those conditions, then the water can't hold anymore, even though more is dissolving. When it does that, then it starts to precipitate the metals and we start getting staining. Usually when we get staining, it's because we've dissolved some of the metal components in the pool. The other reason, of course, is if you're getting metal in the incoming water. And copper and iron are both allowed to be in drinking water. They're allowed to be at a low level. So when you add water to the pool, when it dilutes and everything, it's not such a big problem. But eventually you can build metals up to the point where they can stain the pool. So it is something that once in a while, as a service tech, maybe every couple of months, you should run a test for iron and copper and see if the level's going up.
And I don't want to plug too many products, but I have the new Color Q Pro 9 2X or 2X Pro 9, and I really like the fact that photometer tests for copper and iron. And I think if you're a pool professional, you should have some way of testing for copper and iron in the water as part of your regimen.
Absolutely. I often tell guys, listen, you're going to tell me you don't want to spend $600 or $700 on a test system, but you just spent $40,000 or $50,000 on the truck that you drive around in to take care of the pools, and how do you justify that when you can't spend $500 on a test system? So get a good test system. You test the water every time you go to every pool. If you're getting bad results, and adding chemicals based on those bad results, isn't that test kit affecting your life, your livelihood, your reputation, and you're letting it fall on a cheap piece of junk test kit? Get a good one, get some good answers so you can add the right chemicals to the pool and do your job right.
Yeah, exactly. And so back to the low pH here on a vinyl and fiberglass pool. Why is it that the pH seems to always drift lower on those surface types? And I know that a lot of fiberglass manufacturers will void the warranty on you if you use tablets, 3-inch trichlor tablets, because those lower the pH, of course. And so why with that pool surface type are we all running into lower pH?
The vinyl, I guess we should back up. On a plaster pool, we've got some alkalinity and some calcium coming out of the pool itself and dissolving into the water. It's just a little bit, but it's enough to keep the water in balance. But what happens is with a vinyl pool, there isn't any source. And so once the pH and alkalinity get a little bit low, the water becomes aggressive and is looking for something to dissolve. And if there's any metal, it starts dissolving it. If interestingly enough, low pH actually affects the vinyl more than chlorine level does. When I was at Leslie's as their technical director, one of the things I did was I took pieces of vinyl and I literally poured liquid chlorine on top of vinyl, fresh out of the jug, onto the vinyl, and it didn't do anything. On the other piece of vinyl, I put 1 drop of muriatic acid and the color disappeared out of the vinyl. 1 drop. And it disappeared the color. It made a white spot on blue vinyl where 1 drop hit it. So low pH is no good for vinyl, but it goes low because there's not a source of alkalinity and calcium that's coming out of the walls.
Is that true also for hot tubs? The above ground fiberglass hot tubs, I'm always running into those with low pH also. Or is that the bather load? What could be causing that in like a 350-gallon above ground hot tub?
Well, that can be the chlorine source. If it's a busy spa, you've got either trichlor or dichlor being put in there, both of which are a little bit acidic. A lot of times we see spas, the pH going very high all the time because we've got aeration and turbulence, which raises the pH a lot. It may be that if you've got a spa like that, it may not be used very much, or it may be used a lot, and they're putting a lot of chlorine in there, and the chlorine level is actually lowering the pH and the alkalinity. And don't forget, our bodies have a pH of about 7.45, believe it or not. Overall, blood system, everything, 7.45. So keeping the pH either direction, 0.3, plus or minus from that is okay. But when you get outside of that range, it can become irritating. So we're looking at 7.8 or 7.2 being a problem. So when you get to 7.2 or when you get to 7.8, you can have body irritation.
On both ends of the spectrum.
That's right. And you combine that with a little bit of combined chlorine or chloramines. And chloramines, believe it or not, are irritants, and you can smell them at 0.2 parts per million, which is the reason that we say that combined chlorine should not be greater than 0.2 parts per million, because it becomes an irritant at that level, and you can also smell it.
And so the best way to raise low pH, now I'll throw this out there, I've done this, and a lot of the members of my group, they'll go to Walmart and they'll buy 20 mule team borax, and they'll put it into the raise the pH of the pool. And you're adding borates to the pool at the same time at some level. But what's the best way to raise the pH? I think the borax product, in my opinion, is a great way to do it if it's really low and you're wanting to raise the pH. But you wouldn't be using baking soda. That's a lot of people are selling that as something that raises pH. I know even on the bag of the baking soda, if you buy the 10-pound bag at Costco, it'll have it says, the raised pH, add this to the pool, but that's a misnomer, right?
Yeah, it really is. Bicarb, so that you can get a little bit of an understanding, the strongest solution you could make of bicarb would have a pH of 8.3. So that's the highest it can go. Even if you put a whole bag of bicarb in your spa, the pH isn't going to go over 8.3. And you can see if your pH was already 7.2 or 7.4, if you added some bicarb to the water, it's really not going to change the pH very much, because it's not very strong. Soda ash has a pH of 13. So when you add it, there's a big difference between 7.5 and 13. So it raised the pH a lot. But bicarb does not raise the pH unless the pH is very low. If the pH was, say, 6.8 and you put in some bicarb, it's going to raise the pH, but not very much. If you added enough to get the alkalinity to the right spot, the pH would still be low.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't use bicarb to raise the pH. If you ever get the pH below about 5, you can't put bicarb in anyway. It won't raise the pH at all, because below a pH of 5, when you put bicarb in, it gases off as CO2. And so it doesn't work. In any case, I would not use bicarb to raise pH at all. You can use borax. It adds a little bit to alkalinity. Borax has a pH of about 9.2. So when you add it, it raises the pH more than bicarb would, but less than what soda ash might.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't appear to affect your alkalinity much, but as you might have guessed, we make an adjustment to the saturation index for cyanuric acid. There is also an adjustment you have to make to the saturation index for borate. If you do put borates in your pool, your alkalinity figure your total alkalinity reading is actually lower than you think it is.
Is there a percentage number for that, like offhand?
No, it doesn't work that way. It does for cyanuric acid.
Yeah.
We can use basically 1/3, but because it's a buffer to keep the pH from going high, the higher the pH, the more it affects it. At a pH of 7.5, if 50 parts per million of borate would only affect the reading by about 6 or 7 parts per million. But as you get up to 7, 8, or 8, now it affects it about 20. And if you get up above 8.2, it affects it about 40.
And we should also mention that soda ash also raises alkalinity as well as the pH.
Yes, and it raises it ounce per ounce. It raises it more than bicarb does.
And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description. So if you have a pool with low alkalinity and low pH, the soda ash is perfect.
That's right. That's right. When you need to raise both, use soda ash, and when you need to just raise alkalinity, use bicarb. But don't forget that you can aerate to raise pH.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I tell people, listen, if your pH is low and your alkalinity is low, you can add just bicarb to get to the exact alkalinity that you want. And then aerate till you get to pH of 7.5, and you'll have a perfectly balanced pool.
Yeah. So if you have a hot tub that has a really low pH, let's say it's at 6, and the alkalinity is at 40, put some baking soda in there, and then turn that thing on and let it run for a couple hours.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Put enough baking soda to get the alkalinity up to 80 or 90, and then turn the aerator on, the blower and the jets and whatever. And in a spa, you'll probably raise the pH up to 7.5 in about a half an hour.
Yeah.
It's really a short time.
And then I guess lastly, the lower the pH, I mean, I know that cyanuric acid is a big factor in the chlorine kill factor, but you mentioned that at the lower pH, it makes the killing part of chlorine more effective. So a pool at 7.6, technically, let's say the cyanuric acid level is in range at 50 parts per million. Pool at 7.6 or 7.4, the chlorine will have a better killing ability than a pool at 8.0.
You know, probably not, because we used to believe that all of the chlorine was, subject to that fraction that I told you, 50%
Mm-hmm.
HOCl and 50% OCl minus. But the problem is that when 97% of the chlorine is bound to cyanuric acid, and you've only got 3%, it changes things a little bit, because the concentration of cyanuric acid and the concentration of chlorine changes that 3% figure. It almost doesn't matter as far as it being effective. The real important thing is to get the proper level of chlorine in there. So it doesn't necessarily affect the killing power of 7.5 versus 7.8. The killing power is not going to be that much different, but you need to have enough chlorine in there to prevent the algae. And again, it goes back to that percentage, rather than doing what the pool stores say and keeping 2 to 4 parts per million of chlorine in the water. It doesn't always work. It is 2 to 4, but you're going to find in most cases that the minimum level needs to be nearer to 4 than it does 2.
Yeah, so the guys that are obsessed about keeping the pH at 7.4, 7.6, they're pretty much, it's not making a big difference. I think in the old days, we were always taught that a high pH makes the chlorine less effective, but that's the
And
old
yes, and
days.
we believe that, because as the pH goes up, the effectiveness of the chlorine goes down.
Mm-hmm.
So at a pH of 7.8 or 8.0, you've only got about 20% of the chlorine in the killing form and 80% in the non-killing form. That doesn't matter so much because of the influence of cyanuric acid and the concentration of chlorine and cyanuric acid. So it doesn't matter that much anymore. But we still need to balance the pool. It's not to say that you can keep a pH up around 8 and still have good killing power and everything. You will, but you're going to have bathers unhappy because we got above that 7.8 level, where it starts to irritate bodies. So, you don't want to run a pool at 7.8, because you're right on the borderline of where the water now becomes, bathers will notice the pH. Either they get itchy skin, they get irritated eyes, or something like that, because the pH is 7.8, and all it needs to go is to 7.9, and now you irritate the bathers. At 7.5, you've got 0.3 before you can have a problem.
And if you're looking for other podcasts, of course, you can go to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On the banner, click on the podcast icon. There'll be a drop-down menu of over 1,800 podcasts for you there. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HOCl, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.